And we're live. I'm too lazy to start today. I have a Google shot today. I want to talk about ideologies. Mostly pertaining to religion. That would be like the main one. But like religion, uh, in terms of it being an ideology and how to properly critique it. Yeah. The reason I feel this is necessary is because there are very many people who put out arguments that feel like they hold water, but if you look at them as answers to valid questions, whether you think it's valid or not, it's relevant to someone, so it's valid. So, so if you look at them as answers to valid questions, they don't hold as much water because they're very dismissive in nature, and I'm gonna explain this a while. I don't even necessarily mean that people think lesser of, let's say, religion and answer the relevant questions with that kind of like ego. That is a problem, but that's what I'm going to talk about. The first thing I want to do is present religion as an ideology, which I feel is fair. Ideologies are largely far spread, and I feel like religion as a whole, although you have like specificities within it, is a religion. Okay, it is a system created by ideas or beliefs around a certain topic subject which govern somebody's way of thinking and a way of life, and that is very broad, but that does present something like religion as an ideology. Okay, and the thing with all ideologies is all ideologies come from a place where the best case scenario of that ideology is the utopia of that of it's the kind of utopia of the ideology, right? It is the intended result, for any ideology which is out there. Even though it might be impractical, the result is usually the most pure form of the ideology. Okay, so if you have something like people being politically correct, you're gonna have people in the same camp, for example, who all agree about political correctness but might not necessarily agree on the words to use, for example. So there's a lot of dissent there and differences within the same camp. But the intention of the ideology is, for all words to, let's say, be, what's the word? Agreeable to everyone, I think, not offensive to anyone. So the ideology itself will always intend to be fulfilled in its purest form. That's never what usually happens. However, for you to properly judge an ideology, you need to judge it in its purest form first, before you go to the dissent, which matters, right? But before you go to all of that, you need to look at the ideology in itself, if it makes sense in itself, if it's valid in its purest form. And so, like something like political correctness, I can see, for example, what the ideology says. These are the victims, these are the aggressors, this is what we're doing to stop whatever's happening, and all these things. And I can judge it from such an aerial view, so that any effort to, let's say, support it is justified, right? So if you're going to tweak things outside the system to work with the system, it makes sense, right? Because the system makes sense, right? Whatever it's purporting makes sense. The second thing that you look at, obviously, now will be the places where its applicability will be problematic, because now that's something that you can look down on if the thing is even worth trying to push to be practical in the first place. I feel like with religion, this is like a thing which is very much missed, because I have been religious for a very long time. I've asked myself very many questions that are religious. I feel like I have a bit of knowledge on it. It's been a while since I've actively kind of practiced it, but I feel like I have something. And the thing is, like with most people, you'll kind of agree on some things, right? So like one of the things that I was not able to resolve with religion is I think the idea of evil and the idea of a benevolent God in the same room, and not because like, oh, if there's a God, then there should be no suffering. That's a video all in itself, because it's not an equal sign there. Funny enough, it was, I think, the idea, I don't know, like if you looked around the world, benevolence wasn't really suggested, anything else but, or our type of benevolence wasn't really suggested. However, I've gone through such a tangent. However, even though I agree with some of these people on the end result, it is very, very hard for me to agree with their whys, right? So, like, I usually keep throwing Sam Harris under the bus, and it's not, it's by mistake. I think it's because he's the clearest one. Yeah? I discovered him when he was arguing with William Lane Craig, and that, the debate was, to me, very clearly William Lane Craig's. The entire comment section thought otherwise, and they didn't say why, honestly speaking. So I think, like, I keep meeting him on many instances where he's saying, like, I had to actually move away from his videos on religion to see if he has substance of the things he talks about. And he's a very smart man, but he just kind of, like, I feel like with religion is the place where he keeps kind of tripping up. So I'll use him as an example. The things he says are something around, like, if this was like on the video on William Lane Craig, the debate that they had, where it was something around, why is there suffering if there's a benevolent God, or something of the sort. And he will use things like religious wars to back his points up. And these things are very emotional subjects. Like the moment you present them, a rational discord becomes an emotional one, and it's not by you. Like, that's evidence at the end of the day. It's just that the topic subject is so heavy that you expect that to happen. So I'm not saying that that's not what should have been done. However, I feel like the argument itself doesn't really make sense. So we're going to look at religion the same way we look at maybe the other ideologies, and we say the same thing. So in terms of whatever it offers, in terms of maybe ethical principles, what is its purest form? Does the purest form coincide with what is happening with, maybe, let's say, these the purges of these religious wars and etc.? And I'm going to speak mostly for Christianity, not so much for Islam. And you're going to find, like, for many people who are in these religious wars, people who commit atrocities in the name of our religion, whether this is Islam, whether this is Christianity, the text does not support it. So the text isn't the problem, the ideology isn't the problem, okay? It becomes the people, okay? It becomes people who corrupt something else, because people do that a lot. They corrupt things which are pure for their own ill-intended needs. And so people take something that is, or I don't want to say pure, let me say somewhat clean or somewhat harmless, and then they make it into this, they weaponize it against other people that they disagree with. So they use it as a type of, like, conflict management, but mostly for violence, I think. And it is weird for you to point it back to religion, because the equation isn't there. In these kinds of scenarios, you can't blame the text. And again, I'm not going to speak so much about Islam because I don't understand Islam very much. I'm going to speak about Christianity. The text does not support it. I mean, the text is so, let's say, I don't want to say kind of pacified, because, like, there are the instances in the Bible where there's the question of, there's the response of, like, fight for something, and I'll talk about that later on. But, like, the Bible has such emphasis on conflict that it even, like, suggests, and this is a famous one, for people to love their neighbors, And even though the Bible has a lot of ethical principles that it puts forward, and if you look at the Bible in the Old Testament, you will see kind of God saying, this is bad and I will punish it by doing X, and all those kinds of things. This is where you need to understand the Bible as a narrative and understand those laws applied to those people for a certain reason, right? They were, let's say, chosen. These are the Israelites. They're chosen to represent God, okay? So they were a chosen nation, and so they had a burden to bear. And the burden was all these laws that were put upon them, right? They were the standard of good that they had to comply with so that they shine into the world, or something of the sort. Something of the sort. So there's a narrative there about that. And the thing is, like, as the Bible kind of comes up, these things kind of fade. And not like in terms of they're like, oh, are these things bad or good? The contract kind of changes between Christians and God, and so it becomes a covenant out of like willfully dedicating yourself to God. And this kind of matters because you're going to look at the Bible and you're going to see a lot of instances where it says a lot of the things that we think are okay these days are not. And the thing is, as a Christian, you can't really denounce that, right? But also as a Christian, you're not called to hatred, and that's kind of like the r/whoosh thing that kind of goes on. It's like he expressly forbids it, and so he does not. He calls people unto violence, and it's like, not really. And again, this is a narrative. It just kind of goes on building up, and you're gonna say like he's very, very harsh with his people specifically, and then as it goes on, it becomes about the liberties of the heart and all those kinds of things. So you're gonna see like a lot of Christians who will outrightly, for example, state the fact that they have friends who are gay. They do not agree with it. However, they accept them, they love them. Okay, they love them, but they don't love the action and all those kinds of things. So there's no equation. There's no equating the evil to a text which refuses the evil. You need to kind of zone down on the problem and go like, okay, fine. Why would a person in a religion that preaches peace not be peaceful? It's outside his religion, so it must be him, right? The dissent must come from him. And so again, the problem is people. The problem will always be people. The problem will always be people. They corrupt things. People tend to corrupt things for their own good. We are intelligent enough to understand we want something. We're intelligent enough to take something that is pure and to use it as a tool to gain something. And so that's also something we need to understand. Now, I want to touch on that. I want to touch on one more thing, which pretty much is back to the Bible, actually. The fact that there were all these wars in the Bible and that God endorsed this person and not this person and all these kinds of things. And there's no actual response. There's no way. Okay, one. It does not endorse war. Okay. Again, the Bible is a narrative. It is a story. It has ethical guidelines and all these things, but it's because people write them down and then hand them over to the next person. But it is a narrative. Okay? It spans generations, and as much as it kind of sets all these ethical principles, it tells you about people and what they did with these ethical principles and all these kinds of things. It's a story. Okay, so when they tell you about war, it's not about endorsing them. Okay, and even back then, like even when God was very, very much involved with his nation, like Israel, he was this much with them. They belonged to him. They were his children. There was still some form of like a lack of like full interference where it's like, I will take over absolutely. What used to happen was, because they were his vessel to the world, there were things that he wanted them to do, but there was still like this, like for example, he didn't interact with the entire community, and these communities interacted with through if there was conflict, it was mostly war. And so he didn't, for example, interfere with that will, because that would mess with the free will of people. So I just want to touch on that one also, because it's not, again, an equation of like wars mentioned is equals like wars there. There are people back. I need to go.